What's up, writing cadets? Welcome back to another episode of Moving Right Along, the podcast by young writers for young writers. Today, I'm your host, Jazmin, the co-producer of Moving Right Along. This is my first time being a solo host, and I'm really excited to work towards my plot of a complete takeover. Today, I am thrilled to be sharing this episode with an incredible author, my co-conspirator in this coup. Everyone, please welcome, well, I say everyone, it's just me. Everyone, please welcome the incredible sword-wielding writer extraordinaire, Lillie Lainoff.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be on your first solo episode. How exciting, what an honor. My name is Lillie Lainoff. I am the author of One for All, which is my debut novel, which came out and at the beginning of March this year. It's a YA gender-bent reimagining of The Three Musketeers with a main character with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, like me. It's full of dueling in ball gowns and fierce sisterhood and found family. I'm also a fencer and fencing coach. And I'm the founder of Disabled Kidlit Writers, which is a group of now, I believe, over 450 members of disabled kidlit writers at all stages of their writing careers.
That is incredible. I had no idea that you had started that. That is so cool. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for being here. I saw your book the other day at the library. I did not fight anyone over it, but I did take it and I finished it in a day. I am not a fast reader, but I was invested. It is so good. The mystery and the friendship and just all of the wholesome scenes are just so good. I loved it so much. And it was a wonderful read. I've been recommending it to everyone I know.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No problem. July is a really big month for this book. It is Disability Pride Month. And your main character, Tanya, I believe I'm saying that correctly, yes, has POTS like you do. So Tanya's story of finding friendship, learning to love herself, and determination has really resonated with people around the world. I've seen so many posts going up, especially right now on like book Instagram and all of that. And I genuinely, I know that it has touched so many people. Today, to honor you, though, and this incredible work that left me in tears, I did cry during the friendship scenes. I thought we could take some time to learn about your life and your writing and the importance of diversity in stories, the significance of self-love, and how we can better listen to disabled authors and those with chronic illnesses.
Oh, I love all of that. I've always wanted to be a writer since I was 5 years old, and probably since before I knew what authors were. I just knew that I wanted to be the person who came up with the stories and the books that I read or that were read to me. And One for All, while it's technically my debut novel, it's not the first novel I've written. It's not the second. It's not the third. It is the fourth. I think that that's very indicative of what the actual publishing journey is like for a lot of writers. I think that there's this misconception that writers, especially younger writers, that if you see a younger writer with a book deal, you just think, oh, that was their first novel and they got, overnight success story. When in actuality, I've been writing since I've been working towards this since I was 5 years old. Of course, not with the same dedication or ferocity that I was later in life, because I wasn't able to pull that off at 5 years old. But I have wanted this for such a long time that when you think about it, it's been almost my entire life that I've been working towards this. So One for All is very much the culmination of that.
That is so incredible. Was historical fiction always the genre, or were you into writing all sorts of different things?
Oh, not at all. One for All is the first historical fiction, historical adventure that I've written. I'm actually I lean more towards fantasy and speculative fiction, and contemporary fiction with a speculative tilt. One for All kind of came out of nowhere in the sense that I remember pitching it to my agent who doesn't even represent historical YA and or doesn't represent. I don't think she does. She doesn't represent historical YA, and she was like, "Well, Lillie, okay, we're gonna figure out how to pull this off," because I really wanted to keep it set in a historical setting to pay homage to Dumas and his work, and to keep the amount of political intrigue that I wanted, while also not giving away everything and having everything be too similar to the original, which I think would have happened if I had left it in the same exact time period as the original Three Musketeers.
Okay. Whenever I write a script, usually I'm the behind the scenes. I don't often star in episodes. But whenever I write a script, a question that I really like to ask authors is their favorite writing trope, and then a writing trope that they would love to write but are scared to ever venture into. Do you have a favorite writing trope, and is there something that you've always wanted to write about but never thought to try?
It's such a good question. I think that my favorite writing trope, at least in YA, for me that I love to write, is found family. I do love found family very much, and I think that it's something that I find in all my work, even going back to earlier works. And I think that a lot of that comes back to the disability community and being a disabled author, and the idea that there is this very strong, profound sense of found family within the disability community. And I think my love of the trope stems from that. As far as tropes that I would really love to write, but I'm kind of scared to write, I think that there's some tropes in One for All that I don't want to discuss right now because they're a bit spoilery, but that I kind of touch on. So I'm trying to think of ones that might be a little bit different than that. I think that I personally, Regency romance novels and romance novels got me through the beginning of the pandemic. I was reading one every 2 days. And so I would love to write There's Only One Bed trope. There's only one. I love those tropes. I love romance tropes. I haven't really figured out a way how to pull them off yet, because One for All is, I feel like, a younger YA. But hopefully I have, so many novels in the work and so many works in progress in the works. So hopefully I'll have a chance to explore some of those other tropes.
That is incredible. I feel like so many of the disability community, the people of color and the LGBTQ community have really clung to found family, especially in the last few years in YA. And it works. I eat that up. It is so good. So good. I love the friendship between the girls. That was just the peak for me. How did it sort of the storyline of One for All come to you? If it was not, it wasn't the genre you were used to writing, and it's not, very extremely romancy.
Right. So the story of One for All coming to fruition is I was on submission to publishing houses with a completely different book that didn't sell, that had a cast of almost entirely disabled characters. And I still love that book, and I still hope it finds a home. But while we were out on submission, my agents and I were talking about what my next project was, what I was going to be working on, because one of the important things when you're on submission is to have another project you're working on, not because you're worried that your project won't sell, even though that was the case for me. It's that it keeps your mind off of being on submission. You have to keep busy because there's such a lack of control when it comes to being an author on submission. more so that I think than any other stage in the writing process, because at least when you're querying agents, you have a choice of who you're querying. You have your inbox that's set up, which I mean, hopefully you can get a separate writer only account. That way you're not jumping out of your chair every single time your email pings, but that's another story. But with being on submission, your agent or agents are the ones who are advocating on your behalf, and you're not the one getting the emails. So there's this kind of a bit of a disconnect. So you have to keep busy. And for somebody like me who is so invested in her publishing process, I really, really needed to keep busy. So I was talking with my agents about what my next project was, and I can't remember who brought up the subject of retellings, but I remember I was on the phone with them and we were talking and somebody said the word retelling, and within 10 seconds, The Three Musketeers popped into my head and I said, I'm sorry, I have to hang up the phone. And I hung up and I got a notebook out and I wrote One for All at the top, and then I started writing.
Oh my goodness.
So One
This
for
is
All,
an origin story.
yes. And I think that it's also really important to note that that is such a strange origin story, in the sense that I find coming up with initial ideas very difficult. I'll get, plot bunnies of, random ideas, and I generally tend to start with the character and the character voice rather than plot. So sometimes it takes me a while to kind of coalesce plot and character together. So this was the first time, or one of the first times, where it went, wow, I have the premise already, at my fingertips. This is great. And I knew that I wanted The Three Musketeers, looking back, because I was a fencer. I started fencing when I was, 9 years old, and competitively fencing when I was 10. And when I was spending my summers at fencing camp, and we would watch movies during lunch that were related to fencing. So we would watch The Princess Bride, and we watched The Man in the Iron Mask, which was my first introduction to The Three Musketeers. And I remember thinking, wow, this is really cool, but why don't any of the girls have swords?
And that is a good question.
Yes, it's always a necessary question, I think. And I think that too can refer to The Princess Bride, even though I love it. The Princess Bride is one of my favorite movies, and
me too. I love it.
And books, and One for All has a lot of Princess Bride Easter eggs in it. But looking back, that was probably what was going on in the back of my mind when I thought, oh, I need to rewrite The Three Musketeers. But as I started writing, I knew that I wanted to write about a girl fencer. And I didn't realize that Tanya had POTS until maybe a paragraph or two into my drafting process, because as I was writing, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel authentic, and I couldn't figure out why that was. And I had a good think on it, and I realized it was because being chronically ill and being a fencer, both those two things have been so entwined for me. I've been a competitive fencer since I was 9-10 years old. I've been chronically ill since I was 12, but technically, I've had chronic migraines since I was 4 or 5. So I've technically been chronically ill for a lot longer. And I only had maybe a few years of competitive fencing without me having POTS. So it's very difficult for me to imagine fencing without POTS. So it was difficult for me to write fencing scenes and duel scenes without having the lens of a character with POTS. So it was kind of scary at first to think about, okay, well, I'm going to put my own perspective down on the page, and I just had a book that didn't sell with all disabled characters, and am I setting myself up for failure? And I realized that I just didn't really care, in the sense that, of course, I cared emotionally, but it was more important for me to do justice to the story that I wanted to tell and to keep it authentic than it was to sell it. And the story flowed from there. I have a lot of people ask and say, oh, well, it's not really a Three Musketeers retelling. And yes, it's more of a reimagining, because I'm not going to put the exact characters of men who were in their 20s and 30s and 40s into the characters of teenage girls. I mean, that's just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But the characters are more, at least my Musketeers, I take the personalities of the original Three Musketeers and I abstract them. So the example that I've given in the past is Porthos is known as being hungry and very lascivious and drinks a lot, and Portia is metaphorically ferociously hungry.
Oh my gosh, it's all coming together in my brain.
She's hungry for women's rights. She's hungry for certain characters. She's hungry for all these things that she perhaps knows that she can't achieve, but she's going to fight her hardest to achieve them.
So like such a unique way of the retelling. I love that.
And so that's the angle that I came at it towards. And I knew that I wanted, as I said earlier, I wanted something that wasn't at the same exact time period as the original Three Musketeers, because then there would be no sense of political intrigue because everybody would know it. And I also didn't want to do Versailles, because as much as I love Versailles, it's been done a lot. And I didn't think that my book would stand out. And I realized that there weren't a lot of fiction books, or I'm sorry, a lot of novels written about the time period between La Fronde, which is the French Civil War, and one of the French Civil Wars, and Versailles, that kind of 6-year period. Is kind of, there was a gap, and there's also unfortunately a research gap, which made my research really, really fun. But there's this interesting 6-year period that I thought, okay, I can write into this. I can set up a really interesting dynamic with these characters, and also a very young king who is around that time, is their age. So, and I think, I'm sorry, that was a very long tangent.
No, that is so interesting to me.
But I think, did that answer your question? I think it
no, for sure. Yeah, it did. Were you, I had no idea you were so, like, I had never thought about the exact time period in which it occurs. I thought that's where the original